Welcome to the QP Diaries Podcast. This podcast is all about inspiring and empowering the next generation of QP professionals and future quality assurance leaders in the UK pharmaceutical industry. On every episode, I'll be speaking to QPs from across the industry, and our listeners will have the opportunity to hear their stories, their expertise, and we're going to be discussing topics to foster growth and learning to help you develop your career as a qualified person. If you're passionate about quality assurance and want to learn from some of the very best QPs and thought leaders from across the industry, then this is a podcast for you. I'm your host, Dal, founder of AssureBio, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. We are proud to have partnered with NSF as a sponsor of the QP Diaries podcast. Becoming a qualified person is a significant commitment of time, effort and resources, and the QPs trained by NSF are widely recognised as the very best in the industry, with no other training provider matching their experience or success rate. If you're interested in learning more about NSF's QP training course, you can find the link in the show notes. For now, we hope you enjoy this episode of the QP Diaries podcast. Hi Graeme, welcome to the QP Diaries podcast.
Hi Dal, good to see you. Nice, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, no, thanks for agreeing to be a guest. So it was a pleasure having this conversation with you. I mean, I think I've been trying for a number of years actually to get you on, but we're finally here, and you've got an interesting story to tell.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah.
So I'm excited to ask you a few questions today. First of all, of course, understanding your experience, your background and your journey to becoming a QP.
Yeah.
Then your experience as a QP and now where you are now, and something a little bit different, a bit more career focused as you're a contractor.
Yeah.
And to share your insights on the pros and cons of the contracting world as a QP, which I know would be quite insightful for our listeners.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's get into it, Graeme. Do you want to kick us off? Can you take us back to the very beginning and let us know your story to become a QP?
Yeah, I mean, how far back do you want to go? I suppose if I go back to sort of when I started QP training, or a little bit back before that, because I think my path to QP was a bit different from most people. I think most people would have come from a QA QC background, or at least that was what I thought when my perception of trainee QPs. I had only been working for about a year in QA when I was asked, or when I started QP training, because for the first 20 years of my career, I worked in production. I worked in production operations in different pharma companies with different dosage forms, and I fortunately had been involved in tech transfers and startups and a lot of qualification and validation. So I worked in production, and I was a production supervisor, production manager, plant manager, and so on. But I had that sort of background in validation, qualification, tech transfers, and I would say I was probably always a quite compliance-minded operations person. I kind of understood GMP, and GMP to me made common sense. It was good practice, so why wouldn't you follow it? And after about 20 years, I was working in Baxter Healthcare in Thetford, and I moved into quality to take up a position as a sort of a quality lead on a very large CapEx project that they were working on at the time. And the then plant quality manager, a gentleman called Darren Davis, somebody I'll be eternally grateful to forever, asked me would I consider doing QP training one day. And it had never really crossed my mind to do QP training. I thought it was just something that somebody else would do. It was maybe not on my radar, but I think Darren, God bless him, must have thought, oh, we could make a good QP out of Graeme, possibly. And I didn't have to be asked twice, and I think within 24 hours I'd signed up for the first module, and I did my training with NSF. So I think the first module that I did was law and admin. So as I say, I didn't really have a background in QA or quality assurance or anything, and I kind of jumped into the law and admin module as my first module. And I remember coming away at the end of that week with a folder of 600 pages and going, how on earth am I going to get through all of this? So I guess in the quick version of my story was, from that point forward, I did all 13 modules, one after the other, more or less in sequence. finished the last module. I think I submitted my application probably about 8 or 9 months later. There was a bit of a gap between sort of finishing the last module and pulling everything together and getting into a position where I could submit my application. Because I was kind of thinking, well, if I submit my application and they come back and say, okay, your Viva's in a month's time, I wouldn't have been ready. So I submitted my application in, I think, about 8 months later, and in September, the 24th of September 2019 at 2:15 p.m. I took my Viva and thankfully passed. So that got me to that point.
Brilliant. Okay, yeah. So as you say, your journey was a little bit different, but it was more that, you were identified as someone who potentially could be a strong QP for the business, the organisation at that time.
Yeah.
And you immediately said,
why
not?
Why wouldn't you, I suppose? And I think I remember one of the concerns I had when I started QP training and speaking to one of the NSF tutors. I thought, well, I've got a background in production. Is that going to, be a hindrance to me, or is it going to sort of mean I'm behind the pack a little bit? And they said, no, they don't think so. And I think in hindsight, coming from a production background helped me immensely in my QP training and being a QP, because I understood processing. I understood things like critical process parameters and critical quality attributes, and I understood design space, and I understood the detail of processing. And I think that really helped when it came to sort of scenarios or situations that would arise in the course of being a QP. I suppose I knew all the tricks, and I probably had invented one or two of them over the years as a production manager, but I think it really stood to me. And it meant the only maybe gap that I had, I think, was QC. The last time, even though I had a postgraduate degree in chemistry, I hadn't been in a lab, working in a lab, since I'd been in uni. So that was where I had quite a significant gap that I had to address as part of my QP training, so that I was on reasonably good ground on that in the Viva.
Yeah, so coming through the route that you did, I suppose, as you say, there were advantages, but then also disadvantages when you were going through the training courses. Did you find that quite challenging, being in the room with other trainees at the time, going through the modules?
Yeah, I did. I think particularly, I think as time went past, that changed, but I think certainly when I sat in my first module, which was law and admin, I really felt it. I felt like a bit of an imposter, I'll be honest. That kind of imposter syndrome. Like, I'm not good enough to be here. I don't know my stuff. Everybody knows more than I do. I got over that quite quickly, and I embraced the QP training, and I loved it. I must say that about the NSF training, and I can't speak for any of the other companies that do the training, but I loved NSF, and they're incredibly supportive. And I quickly found myself I found my little niche, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. I enjoyed going to the modules, but at first, I must say I did find it intimidating, and I kind of kept my mouth shut for the first few days before I started to yammer on like I do.
So you eventually found your confidence, which is which is good. I assume at the same time, going back to the office and having the QPs within the organisation as well, that was obviously a massive help to support your training.
Yeah, it did, for sure. I mean, there was trainee QPs in Baxter. There was some very experienced QPs there. I was very lucky. I had a great sponsor. Helen Vickery was my sponsor, and she was incredible. And in terms of Viva prep, I think we had regular get-togethers to go through Viva topics, not just Viva questions. When you're doing the modules and maybe if you've done 4 or 5, like, there's no point in really doing too much Viva questions, because there will be topics you don't know. You mightn't have covered IMPs, you mightn't have covered APIs, so there's not much point in throwing Viva questions at somebody who hasn't done those modules. But we might take a topic like, I don't know, sterility testing, or mutual recognition agreements, or validating a tablet press or something like that, and we construct an answer. We'd say, let's say that's the question, maybe draw me a compendial water system, and we construct the answer to that question. And then as I got deeper into the modules and I had my application submitted, we were doing maybe kind of we'd find a meeting room twice a week, and she'd just fire Viva questions at me. And I think leading up to I suppose about sort of 6 months before my actual Viva, I must have done about 5 actual mock Vivas, including one with NSF. So that was great prep, and it was really important to have a sponsor who was that committed and supportive.
Yeah. Well, my next question is going to be around the preparation. So you believe that obviously the sponsor, the support, the whole way through to the point of Viva is obviously absolutely critical.
I would say
to get you ready and prepared. For the
Viva. Absolutely. If you're lucky enough to have a good sponsor like I had, then you're more than halfway there. If you don't, if your sponsor is somebody who just can't commit the time for whatever reason, you can. There's still a lot I think you could do yourself. You can get involved with some of your other trainee QPs and do Viva sessions. One of the things I did, and I don't know if other people did this. So what I used to do between the modules is I'd summarize the notes from the modules, and when I had finished that, I'd read them back to myself, and I'd record my voice, and then I'd put that onto my iPhone. And I had a 45-minute commute each way, so trying to fit in QP study between your job and your personal life is difficult. So I thought, I've got an hour and a half in the car every day. I can put that to good use. And I used to listen to my voice notes. I just, Apple CarPlay and listen back to my voice notes. And, as much as I could do it, because it wasn't exactly the most, it's not like a riveting podcast or some good music, but at least it was, a way of using that time. And then when I was driving up to York, I lived in Norwich at the time, and I would drive from Norwich to York for the next QP module. I would listen to the notes on that journey. That was about a 3.5-hour journey, and then I would take NSF did an exam on a Sunday night before the next module, and I'd take the exam. So I just found out that was just one little thing that I did, and I found it worked for me. It was helpful. It was a good use of some spare time I had. What other things did I do? I suppose I filled out my application, as we're all told, kind of fill out the application form in real time. I tried to do that, but certainly if I did a site visit or something like that, I'd stick it down in the application form as quick as possible. I did, a lot of mock Vivas, plant visits, those voice notes. And then I suppose the prep for the Viva itself, and this is probably lots of people that would know this already, but I probably prepared as well as I could for the actual day. And I felt that was important to try and do as much as I possibly could to take the doubt out of things. So I kind of got up to London the night before. I was staying in a hotel that was a couple of tube stops away from the Royal Society of Chemistry, but I got the tube to the RSC. I walked down to Piccadilly. I went up to the door of the RSC, and came back again. So I knew the following day that I knew where to go. I wasn't going to come out of my hotel and go, oh, where do I go now? And take the tube in the wrong direction or something like that and get panicky. So lots of little things like just on the day to have like the hotel booked well in advance to, map your journey or walk your journey to the RSC or wherever you're taking your Viva. I suppose don't do what I did as well, which was like I thought I had everything, all my ducks lined up in a row, and and the night before the Viva, I just couldn't get to sleep, and it's just, I guess it's just one of those things, and I had my Viva at 2:15 in the afternoon, so I remember checking out of the hotel at 11 o'clock and having to hang around until 2:15, and I think all the hanging around, by the time I got halfway through my Viva and the adrenaline had worn off, I felt absolutely shattered. So, so it's kind of like, you prepare as best you can, because something might go wrong, and hopefully, if you're well prepared, if something does go wrong, you can bounce back for it, or you can get over it. So, I think I was saying to you earlier, it's a bit like, you play badly, but you still win. So I put the prep in, and it wasn't, I remember thinking the Viva was, everybody said, oh, you'll sail through it. It'll be, you'll enjoy it. And I was thinking, I don't think I quite did. I don't think I quite sailed through it, but I think it was because I felt quite halfway through it. I felt quite shattered, and but I still managed to get to the end of it and get it over the line. So
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So during the day, then, of course, I mean, maybe that was at your control, the timing of the actual Viva itself, which then you have to check the hotel, and it's a long wait in between. But what about being in the room on the day? Do you believe that all your preparation prior to that day was sort of, I should say, you did the best you could, but ultimately you passed first time, right?
Yeah. Thankfully, yes, I did. I think it's one of those things. I mean, I've done exams most of my life, between secondary school and university and postgrads I've done, and I think I was probably as well prepared for. I was better prepared for my Viva than any exam I've ever done. It just, QP just meant so much to me. It was something I was honestly really proud to be doing, and really grateful to my organization that I had the chance to do it. So it was really meant a lot to me. So I really prepared. And I think the thing with a Viva is, if you can, in some other countries, I know in Ireland, for example, where I'm from, the QP process is a bit different. So you can, and it's certainly not any criticism of the process in any other country, but if you sit a written exam and the pass mark is 50, you get 50% of that exam right and you've passed. I think with the Viva in the UK, there's very little. You have an hour and 15 minutes. You don't know what you're going to get asked. You really have to know every aspect of the study guide. So you have to be super prepared, not just in terms of what you know, but how you deliver your answers, so that you come across as being, pragmatic, as being, very knowledgeable about the legislation and guidance and technical aspects of being a QP. So it really tests you. So you really do need to know your stuff when you go into a Viva. So I think everybody who goes into a Viva, if they've got to that point in the process, they certainly know their stuff. I mean, the Royal Society of Chemistry or Biology or Pharmaceutical Society wouldn't put you forward or wouldn't accept you to Viva if they've looked at your application form and they've clearly thought this person is ready for a Viva. And the Viva is just the last piece in the puzzle. But you still need to be very prepared. So I certainly felt super prepared, and I don't think if I had failed it, I would have thought, well, you gave it your best shot, and I wouldn't have felt any regret. But thankfully I didn't fail it. So
yeah, it went well. And going back to your tip you mentioned earlier about you were recording your voice, you were listening back in the car journeys, you were maximising the time, which, as we know as busy professionals, that is always hard to find the opportunity to train and learn and so on. Do you think those sort of actions that you were taking to prepare really helped you? Yeah,
I think they helped me early on. I suppose I was doing this sort of when I was in the middle of the module, so they helped me to learn a module, and because very often one module supports the next one. So if you're doing, say, law and admin, then that's going to support with role and duties, or it's going to support with quality management systems. So it helped. If I just put the folder away at the end of the week, and I'll come back to that when I finish all the modules, I don't think that would have been a very helpful thing. I think it certainly all of that. I think it's all preparation, and it just helped me to familiarize myself with those subjects, which sort of supported then my Viva prep and how I was starting to answer Viva questions and so on. So yeah.
We're taking a moment to share a message from Catherine Kay, who is the Executive Director at our sponsor NSF, where she highlights the benefits of their training programme for trainee QPs.
Our trainers for our courses are experts. They're experts from industry, have had many years' experience and bring a wealth of knowledge to our training courses. We also provide Viva preparation sessions for them every month, where they can practice answering questions in a group scenario. NSF have a long-standing partnership with the University of Strathclyde, so not only do our courses meet the requirements of the QP study guide, but they're also taught at a master's level. So that means that people can go on to and acquire a postgraduate certificate, diploma, or even master's with the University of Strathclyde. Then you can go to our webpage, so nsf.org, and we have a whole page there set to our qualified person training, so you can read more there.
Yeah, so you passed your Viva, so then you started your role as a QP within Baxter?
Yeah. So once I think I was on the licence a short while few months later. And I was kind of doing a dual job there. I was a validation manager and QP, which is a bit of a funny combination, but I didn't mind. So I think about half of the time would have been certifying batches, and the rest of it doing kind of leading the validation team. I was certifying batches all the way through the pandemic, so I was going into the office and into the plant every day during the pandemic, and keeping there, because we at the time were producing the bags for infusion, so they were obviously critical for the NHS. I was working at Baxter until I think I must have been about another year and a half with Baxter, I think, and then I moved to cell and gene therapy Catapult. So I moved from terminally sterile to ATMPs, which was a lovely change. I mean, that's just a dosage form that is quite interesting, or very interesting. I worked with as head of QA and QP with cell and gene therapy Catapult until about 2 years ago, and then I decided for a change of my personal circumstances meant that I became a contract QP, and I've been working as a contract QP now for 2 years, and it's very different. I very much enjoy being a contract QP. I guess you're doing pure QP stuff as a contract QP. There's a lot of other aspects to being a contract QP apart from being a QP. I mean, there's the whole aspect of actually running your own business and doing all that type of thing. But so at the moment, that's where I'm at. I'm working as a contract QP.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, so you went from Baxter to Cell and Gene Catapult, and then that was leadership. Yeah. But obviously, you were named in the license as a QP then, and then personal circumstances changed. So you made the transition into contracting. So I think it's really important to share a little bit more about your journey becoming a contractor, as it was more of a change of personal circumstances rather than a forced move.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you can share that, Graeme.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, I suppose I had a choice of whether to remain full time, and I had been speaking to another contract QP, Richard Tarrant, who I think a lot of people listening would know Richard, and he's working as a contract QP, and he kind of gave me a little bit. I had a couple of calls with Richard because I was starting to consider it, and he gave me the sort of the background to it and what's involved in being a contract QP, and there's a lot of things you don't think of when you think of contract QPs. You don't think about, well, you have to set your business up. You have to think of a name. I wasn't exactly original. GCQP Consulting is not exactly the most original thing, but it does what it says, I suppose. You have to start to understand things like contracts, IR35, paying VAT, paying corporation tax, performing self-assessments. I got an accountant to do a lot of these things because they were all new to me. Obviously, there's the aspects of issuing invoices, paying your expenses, doing your accounts, marketing yourself as much as anything, even kind of branding yourself. And this is something I didn't think of as a contract QP. You have a reputation. People will know that you're a contract QP. There are some contract QPs that are well known, and there are some that aren't. And if you're, I suppose, I maybe at the time had the impression that as a contract QP, I'm going to be turning work away. That it's always going to be, someone's always going to be knocking on my door asking me, can you? And it's not quite like that. And I think after I'd started as a contract QP, I remember speaking to another contract QP who said, yeah, probably about 20% or 1 in 5 leads will actually lead to some contract work. And I think it's even less than that, because it's relatively, I think my perception as it's quieter now in terms of contract QP work than it probably has been for quite a while. I think you might share that view as well, Dal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think these are the sort of, when it comes to becoming a contractor, there's so much involved in it. And as you alluded to, it's like setting up a business. How do you do that? Do you have an accountant who can recommend that to you? How do you pay yourself?
Yeah.
Obviously, you need to have business money coming into the business in order to pay yourself either via a salary or a dividend. IR35. A lot of people don't understand what IR35 is, and the tax compliance, and how you then have to speak to your clients and propose your services as a business service provider versus an individual being a QP. There is a huge difference, and a lot of people don't think about that. There's at the moment, as you mentioned, the market, it probably isn't where it needs to be. However, there are still so many benefits to being a contractor.
Absolutely.
Which I'm sure you found as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, first of all, I think it's something that maybe 20 years ago or 15 years ago, I wouldn't have been interested in being a contractor. At this stage of my life, it suits me. It's the flexibility, I think, is the best advantage. So, you don't necessarily work 5 days a week, or if you want to, you can work 5 days a week. It's entirely up to you. I mean, obviously it depends on the contracts that you have as well, but which ones you might accept and which ones you don't. But I think the flexibility is probably the best thing. I mean, the other thing is, like, you are, at the end of the day, you're not a full-time employee, so you don't have the benefits of pension. You don't have the benefits of a lot of the other things that you'll get in a company. And I suppose as a contractor, you're kind of slightly on you're somewhat on the periphery of certain things. So you might come into a company for a while and you'll be there, and you may make some connections, or you may not, and then you'll move on. So it is, you're somewhat like a hired gun in some respects. So maybe, I was more than 25 years working as a full-time employee. So contracting was a change. I had to sort of understand that you are a contractor. You come in, you may not be there for a long period of time, and you'll move on. Whereas other companies I'd worked for as a full-time, I had been there 6 or 8 years, and I, made connections and made friendships that to this day I still have. That's not always how it's going to be with contracting. You come in, you do a job. You might even be just going into a place and doing an audit, and that's that. You won't have any further involvement in the facility or the people again after that. But I think above all, for me, it's the flexibility it gives you, and it is pure QP work. So I'm not involved in any line management or strategic, or very little strategic type of things, which I think after 25 years of that, I'm quite glad not to be, really.
So in terms of your business right now and how you operate, it is just pure QP services.
Yeah. I mean, I am a lead auditor, so I could do some audit work, but it's the work I'm doing right now is all pure QP. And pure QP doesn't mean just certifying batches. You will be involved, as any QP knows, and any trainee QP knows. You could be involved in, there's a scenario or a situation with a batch or a piece of equipment or product out in the marketplace or whatever, or an issue in QC. So you can be involved in an awful lot of things, and you can be involved in some projects. Maybe there's a tech transfer happening. Maybe there's a validation of a new piece of equipment, and project teams that get QPs involved in these things early on generally tend to be quite successful. So if there's, for example, a tech transfer, and if the first the QP ever knows about that is when the first tech transfer batch comes across their desk to be certified, it can maybe not necessarily go too well. But if a QP is involved in these things early doors, then they tend to have a better chance of success. And QPs can very often, not just in terms of sort of legal and compliant guidance and legislation, they can provide a lot of their experience of processing and so on to projects, and sort of say, look, you want to consider this and you might want to consider that. So do involve QPs as much as possible. We like to be included.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you find it being a little bit different with the pressure of being, you're operating as an independent consultant, as a business, going and providing service to your clients. So do you find it a different sort of pressure with that responsibility and
that's an interesting
weight on your shoulders?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think as I've got older, and I'm working over 30 years now, I think the effect of pressure, thankfully, has gotten a bit less, maybe because I've learned to deal with it. And I think in the workplace nowadays, there so much is demanded of people, and people are under an awful lot of pressure, and it can really affect people's mental health. It can certainly affect decisions that they make, and it can determine if somebody stays in a job or doesn't stay in a job. I think talking personally, I don't feel as much pressure as I did, say, 20 years ago. And I think that's because I'm more experienced and I have a different view of, I'm not going to allow that to pressure to affect me the way it might have done when I was, a bit younger. I also think just being a QP and having gone through the training and having, I suppose, quite a bit of experience under my belt, I feel there's not very much that I haven't seen. So when things tend to happen, I go, well, I've seen that happen before. Or I understand what I should do in this situation. I think QP training certainly helped immensely with that. And it's very important to maintain your kind of continuous process of professional development, because, legislation and guidance changes and new things come in. But, given the amount of prep that you have to do to get yourself ready for a Viva, you really do know your subject. You are a subject matter expert when you come out. Even if you fail the Viva, if you get as far as taking the Viva, you're a subject matter expert, and that's great support for. I found that massively supportive, because I usually had a fairly good idea of what to do if there was a crisis situation, or there was a situation in production. So that tended to take a lot of the pressure off me. So I think a combination of just my own experience with pressure, and QP training and what that gave me and the confidence it gave me, I think means that I don't thankfully suffer from the effects of pressure as much as I used to. So I hope that long continues.
Yeah, that's good. That's a great insight, because it comes down to how your career's evolved, and as you say at the beginning of that conversation, you took a bit of a you didn't mean to fall into becoming a QP. You were asked to become a QP, but you came from a production background, and it was a certain time in your life and your career. But all of that combined together means that you're in a position now where maybe the pressure is not as intense as it would be for others.
I certainly find it's manageable.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
No, that is interesting, because I've been recruiting contract QPs for over a decade now, and they all have different experiences. And feel different pressures in different projects. Some could be remediation. Some could be quite a high workload of a QP batch certification. Where you have to deliver as a contractor.
I think there can be a lot. I do remember at one stage in Baxter, I think for about 6 months I was the only QP, and the pressure was there because, well, somebody had to certify those batches, and there was a demand for them naturally. So, but then with that comes a responsibility, and I was more than happy to take that responsibility on, and I felt I was in a small way, particularly around the pandemic, in a small way, I was contributing something, because, these were medicines that were being used every day for the treatment of patients with, not just with COVID, but with other, lots of other conditions. And I felt that, in a small way, I was making that contribution. So, I don't think people wouldn't necessarily, certainly if I meet anybody, friends of mine or family who, don't work in the pharmaceutical industry, and they ask me what I do, trying to explain what a QP does. First of all, nobody's ever heard of a QP. And trying to explain what it is that I do, I don't know how. I've tried many times to put it in kind of simple terms or succinct terms, but I've never really succeeded. And people just look at me, so you work in something to do with medicine? Yeah. And I give up trying to explain. If anybody out there has got a good, analogy or explanation of what it is that a QP does that they can, explain to non-QP or non-pharma people, then I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I'm sure our listeners maybe can share it.
Yeah, bet they can. Yeah, somebody out there knows.
Brilliant, Graeme. And going back to just in general your career as a quality professional, as a QP, what's the best ever advice that you've received that you would pass on?
That I received?
To maybe the next generation of aspiring QPs.
Yeah, do you know what? This might sound a bit sad, but I don't think anybody ever at any point in my career took me to one side and said, "I'll give you some good advice, Graeme." Okay. And I could possibly be blamed for not going and looking for that advice, because people don't necessarily take you to one side and give you that valuable nugget of information. Mm-hmm. And I probably should have been a bit better at looking for feedback. So that was probably some advice that I would give to somebody. I don't know. Maybe the best advice I ever got was probably from my own father, actually. And when I was younger, he used to say, "What's for you won't pass you by." And I always used to think, what do you mean by that, Dad? That doesn't make sense, really. But I think it, as I got older, it started to mean something to me. And I think it's a bit like hopefully you'll eventually find what it is that you enjoy doing, or what it is that you love doing. Because I think as people, we make kind of conscious and subconscious decisions about what it is we like to do, and our actions then are directed towards doing that. And I think over the time, I ended up becoming a QP because, I got somebody else pushing me in that direction. And then it was probably something that I was naturally, directing myself towards without maybe even realizing it. And I eventually found something that I love doing. So if you can just if you can find something that you're passionate about, and I mean, there's lots of different things in the pharmaceutical and healthcare industry, and, whether it's product development or clinical or human resources or finance or operations or, quality control, whatever it is, try to find what your niche is and what your area is. It could be people management, anything. It could be QP. Find what it is, and you find something that when you know there's something that you love doing. Well, they say, well, you'll never work a day in your life. So if you're lucky enough like me to know what it is that you love doing, then go for that, chase that. But so I guess what's for you won't pass you by. That's you can take it to mean many things, but maybe that's what it means to me, is just try and find what it is that you love doing and stay close to that.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, no, that's great advice. And I mean, I suppose it comes down to even just taking the opportunity when it comes. Yeah, because
exactly.
That's exactly what you did, and then you've now found your passion based on an opportunity being presented to you.
Yeah, I think in the course of your career, you'll get maybe one or two. If you're lucky, you'll get two opportunities, like that. You'll get plenty of knockbacks, and nobody's career ever goes in a straight linear line. Not a nice sort of progression. You'll go forwards, you'll go backwards, you'll go up, you'll go down, and hopefully over time it's always going up. But when you get an opportunity, grab it with both hands, because they don't come by very often.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, well, let's leave it at that, Graeme. Yeah, thank you so much. There's no more questions from myself. I think you've been really honest.
This has been tougher than my Viva.
Yeah, I don't mean it to be tougher than Viva.
No, I've enjoyed it, Dal. It's been lovely to talk to you.
Yeah, but I'm sure it's been good to reflect on your own career.
Yeah, it has been.
Your journey as a QP, which is exactly why we did the podcast.
Yeah.
We can share that as a story with other QPs and thought leadership, and talking about contracting and the realities of the career as a QP. So thank you so much for being a great guest.
Not at all. It's been my pleasure, Dal.
Really great. All right. Excellent.
Okay.
Thanks for your time. Speak
soon.
Bye.
A huge thank you to our special guest and to our listeners for tuning into the QP Diaries podcast. We hope you've enjoyed the show. As the founder of AssureBio, we created the podcast to support our wider quality assurance community, which aligns to our dedicated offering as a recruitment agency to the pharmaceutical and biotechnology industry across the UK. We have over 10 years of experience exclusively focused on recruiting senior quality assurance leaders and QPs. If you want to learn more about AssureBio's recruitment services, or if you would like to be a guest on the podcast, then please don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you.